viewers. In this episode, we are going to learn about tourism in medieval and modern period. This includes 5 objectives. First one, introduction. Second, tourism in Europe. Third, water and rail travel. Fourth, automobile transport. And the fifth one, tourism in 21st century. The Renaissance marked the most important stage in the history of travel. The reappearance of tourism in Europe follows the Italian Renaissance and development of urban system. In medieval times also, trade and commerce remained a strong force for many travelers to take long journeys to distant places. This was followed by an urge to explore new lands and to seek new knowledge in different areas. There are many references to great explorers who spent many formidable years of their life in search of new things. These great explorers perhaps can be credited with the distinction of being the pioneers for the modern concept of travel and tourism. Mr. Benjamin of Theodola, a Jewish scholar, travelled to Europe, Persia and India in 1160 CE, and he wrote an expanded history of his journey for 13 years. There are also some European travellers who visited India during medieval periods. The Franciscan Frair John of Monte, Corrino visited India, China during 13th century. The expeditions of these great travellers have given concrete shape to adventure tourism. Next is tourism in Europe. The young Marco Polo left Venice in the year 1271 CE with his father and uncle. He became the first Western explorer to write a lasting account. They travelled through Persia, Gulf, Afghanistan and reached Kabul and China. On his way back, he visited Sumatra, Java, India and Ceylon. His write-up is more a fiction than a history. Since it draws from tales of many traders, still it is considered as a historical record. In spite of his omission and exaggerations, this book has remained an international bestseller. The Grand Tour. During 17th and 18th century, the Grand Tour was made by diplomats, businessmen and scholars who travelled to Europe, mainly to the cities of France and Italy. It became fashionable for scholars to study in Paris, Rome, Florence and other cultural centres. The Grand Tour began in the beginning as an educational experience, but eventually it became a simple pursuit for pleasure. One of the interesting aspects of Grand Tour was the conventional and regular form it adopted. As early as 1678 CE, Jean Gailhard had prescribed a 3-year tour as customary. For this tour, generally accepted itinerary was laid down, which involved a long stay in France, especially in Paris, almost a year in Italy and return via Germany and Switzerland. Spas, baths and seaside resorts. Another interesting aspect in the history of tourism was the development of spas. After their original use by Romans, which was originated in Great Britain. In the 18th century, spas became very fashionable among the members of high society, not only for the curative aspect, but also for the social events like games, dancing and even gambling. The spa at Bath in England was one such successful health and social resort. Sea bathing also became very popular and some believed that saltwater treatment to skin was very useful. Well-known seashore resorts in Britain were Margate, Ramgate, Worthing, Hastings, Blackpool, etc. By 1861, success of these seashore resorts indicated that there was a great demand for vacation travel. However, these resorts were available only to rich class as they charged very heavily. Common man could not afford to get the service of these resorts. Thus, tourism owes a debt to medical practitioners who advocated the medical value of mineral waters and sent their patients to places where mineral springs were existed. Later, physicians also recommended sea bathing for its therapeutic value. Spas and seashore resorts were firstly visited for health reasons. Soon, they become centers of entertainments, recreations and even for gambling. Next is modern tourism concept. The theory of modern tourism came into being in the second half of 19th century. As a result of industrial revolution, urbanization and bigger cities developed. The society was divided into capitalist and working class. In other words, the society had only two classes, rich and the poor. There were accumulation of wealth in the hands of a few rich people. During that period, travel and tourism was meant only for rich class, as poor could not afford to pay for the tour. Growth of modern tourism therefore can be traced to industrialization. Next is first travel agent. In 1822, Robert Smart of Bristol in England announced himself as the first steamship agent. He began booking passengers to various places from Bristol. In 1841, Thomas Cook began running a special excursion train from Leicester to Loughborough in England. A trip of 22 miles on 5th July 1841. Cook's train carried 570 passengers at a round trip price of 1 shilling per passenger. This is the first publicly advertised excursion train. By 1856, Thomas Cook advertised the first grand circular tour of the continent. He conducted a circular tour from London to Brussels, Waterloo, Cologne, the Rhine, Mainz, Frankfurt, Heidelberg, Baden, Strasbourg to Paris, then to London. By 1869, he was offering a conducted tour of Holy Land to British travellers. He also arranged a tour to India. Thus, Mr. Thomas Cook can rightly be recognized as the first rail excursion agent. His pioneering effort was eventually copied widely in all parts of the world. Thomas Cook's company grew rapidly, providing escorted tours to different countries of the European continent and later other continents as well. Even today, this company continues to be one of the world's largest travel organization. Thomas Bennet, an Englishman who served as a secretary to the British Consul General in Norway, arranged individual scenic tours for visiting British notables. In 1850, he set up a business as trip organizer and provided individual tourist itineraries, carriages, provisions and a travelling kit. He routinely made advance arrangements for horses and hotel rooms for his clients. Another important feature in the development of tourism is the development of transportation. The early tourists travelled on foot, on animals, on boats and on wheeled vehicles pulled by animals. Stagecoach travel. Coaches was invented in Hungary in the 15th century. and provided regular service on prescribed routes. By the beginning of 19th century, stagecoach travel had become quite popular, especially in Great Britain. The development of famous English tavern was brought because of the need for overnight lodging by the stagecoach passengers. Third one, water and rail travel. Under the first one, water travel. Market boats picked up passengers as well as goods on ship canals in England as early as 1772. The Duke of Bridgewater began such service between Manchester and London. Each boat had a coffee house for serving refreshments to passengers. By 1815, they plying the Clyde, the Avon and the Thames, they are all the rivers in England. By 1841, steamship excursions on the Thames were so well established that a publisher was bringing out a weekly steamboat excursion guide. During this period, ocean travel became a comfortable and easy travel experience. In the middle of 19th century, transatlantic steamships were sailing between Europe and North America, taking about 2 weeks' time. In 1889, in the city of Paris, a twin propeller hulled liner cut traveller time between Europe and USA to 6 days only. American tourists started discovering Europe and Europeans rediscovering America became a common feature. International travel by steamship became extensive and also the fastest mode of travel until air travel was introduced in the mid-50s of previous century. However, sea holidays have been reviewed once again by the introduction of luxurious cruise ships. Millions of people who had time and money were experiencing this travel mostly in the developed countries. International travel by ships became extensive and also fastest mode of transport between many countries in Europe and between Europe and United States of America. But with the development of air traffic, steamship travel suffered a setback. Next is rail travel. Railways were first built in England in 1825 and started carrying passengers by 1830. The first railway track was built between Liverpool and Manchester. The fare was 1 penny per mile, which was considered quite cheap. These fares were much lower than stagecoach fare. Therefore, it attracted a large number of passengers. Domestic tourism grew very fast with the introduction of rail travel. Railways were started in USA also by the second half of 18th century. Mr. George Mortimer Pullman was the first person in USA who built a train called Pioneer. It was the first sleeping train where a berth cost $2 per night. Soon the train became a popular mode of transport in the United States of America. American railways, however, were slow to respond to the challenges of the automobile and the air travel. As a result, today railways are not very popular mode of transport in the United States of America. But in Europe and Asia specific region, railways become very popular mode of transport. In India, railways are the largest mode of transport. It is very cheap and comfortable for transporting passengers as well as cargo. France, Germany, China, Japan have developed trains which can run at speed of 350 km per hour. India is also planning to develop bullet train between Mumbai and Ahmedabad. Among other innovations of the railways are monorails on elevated single track, which is being developed in several countries. Some countries are trying to develop aero trains which run on air cushion. Next is tourism in 20th century. The modern concept of tourism really started during the previous century. Although the industrial revolution during 18th and 19th centuries led to a lot of new inventions including steam engines, but it is the invention and greater use of automobiles and air travel that have given a new dimension to the concept of tourism. The travel pattern, especially during the 20th century, have witnessed changes from unorganized conventional pilgrimage and cultural travel in the early times to highly technological, advanced, recreational and special interest travel. From unplanned tourism in the past to well-planned, sustainable and eco-tourism in the present times have changed the whole tourism scenario. The ongoing speedy innovations and technological advances in the tourism infrastructure have led to the provisioning of quality tourism services making travel easier and more comfortable. The changes in the international tourism from grand tour to selected rich people to mass tourism to common people have brought changes in all aspects of tourism. Next is automobile and motor car travel. Automobiles entered the travel industry in the United States of America when Henry Ford introduced his famous Model T in 1908. This revolutionized travel in the country, creating a demand for better roads. Today, automobile accounts for nearly 80% of the domestic travel in the world. Motor coaches also came into use soon and have remained a major mode of transportation. At the end of 2014, there were 260 million passenger cars in the United States of America. At the same period, it was 808.7 million passenger cars in the world. The development of automobile industries had led to the demand for multi-line highways all over the world, especially in the developed countries. Along the major highways, the old wayside inns built to cater to the needs of the road travelers. Some of these motels provide luxury accommodations with parking areas, swimming pools and sport facilities. Next is air travel. Nearly 16 years after the first flight at Kitty Hawk in the North Carolina in 1903, regular scheduled air services began in Germany. This was Berlin-Leipzig-Weimar route, and this carrier later known as Deutsche Lufthansa. Today, Lufthansa is a major international airline. The first transatlantic passenger was Charles A. Levine, who flew Clarence Chamberlin non-stop from New York to Germany. The first US airline, Varney Airline, was launched in 1926 and provided scheduled airmail services. They also started carrying passengers from 26 October 1928. In due course, a number of airlines started operating in United States of America. Because of its speed, comfort and safety, air travel is the leading mode of public transportation today in many Western countries. Most of the international passengers prefer air travel. The first international mail route was flown by Pan American Airways from Florida to Havana in Cuba on 28 October 1927. Introduction of jet travel in 1958 was the most dramatic event in air travel. It brought a new dimension of speed, comforts and efficiency to air transport. This encouraged even common people to take up air travel. The most decisive growth during this period was the development of inclusive tour concept, which travelers are transported on charter flight substantially lower than the normal scheduled services. Next is holiday travel. It was in the last quarter of 19th century that increasing care was given to the desirability of giving holidays to workers with pay. During these times, a few industries gave annual paid holidays to its employees in many Western countries. In fact, introduction of paid holidays can truly be associated with the development of modern mass tourism. In the year 1936, the trade union representatives at the Conference International Labour Organization adopted the first resolution making annual paid holidays obligatory on the part of the employers. The Convention on the Paid Holidays was accepted by only 14 European countries. However, in due course of time, many other countries adopted a system of paid holidays to their employees. As a result, tourism experienced an extraordinary growth because of these paid holidays. In many countries, the period of paid holidays ranged from 2 to 3 weeks per year. Rise in the standard of living of working class in Europe and United States of America is another important factor for the development of mass tourism growth. Next is tourism in 21st century. Tourism is a flourishing industry today. It is expanding very fast and is one of the most rewarding industries of the modern world. International tourism constitutes the invisible export trade. The contribution of tourism to economic activities worldwide is estimated at about 5 to 6% of GDP. For some countries, tourism contribution to GDP is as high as 70% to 90% of the country's GDP. Tourism contribution to employment tends to be slightly higher, and it is estimated at about 6 to 7% of total number of jobs. Many smaller countries have developed sports and adventures to attract tourists. For example, in Maldives, there are no monuments nor any historical places, but has developed adventure water sports in its beaches and is attracting large number of international tourists, particularly from Europe. Similarly, Switzerland and New Zealand are attracting large number of adventure tourists. The income from adventure tourism contributes about 50% of their GDP. In fact, Switzerland and New Zealand are number 1 countries in the world in adventure tourism activities. During the present century, tourism is the second largest industry in the world in terms of creating employment and generating income. For more than 60 countries, it is the main source of foreign exchange earner. Tourism development in India. The importance of tourism as a source of employment and income generation was realized very in India. Though after independence, the government started realizing the importance of tourism, but it is after 1991 when economy was liberalized, tourism got a boost. Next is tourism policy in 2002. In order to develop tourism in India and to give a specific directions to the stakeholders of tourism industry, the Government of India announced a tourism policy in 2002. The National Tourism Policy was formulated in order to position tourism as a major engine of economic growth and harness its direct and multiplier effect for employment generation and poverty eradication. Broadly, the policy attempts to position tourism as a major engine for economic growth, providing impetus to rural tourism. It aims to create and develop integrated tourism circuit based on India's unique civilization, heritage and culture in partnership with all the stakeholders of tourism industry. Huge foreign investment was flown into the country after liberalization. Many multinational companies started their operations in India. Both business travel and leisure travel increased tremendously. A paradigm shift was made towards strengthening tourism infrastructure at key destinations. Civil aviation was radically liberalized. The development of e-business further boosted tourism activities. Chain of hotels entered India. Innovative concepts like rural tourism and medical tourism started becoming very popular in India. The development of information technology has further facilitated tourism. Now, it is very easy to book air, train and even bus tickets online. Hotel reservations and vehicle booking can be made in advance. Concessions are extended to senior citizens in many areas. People have started looking at tourism as an instrument of employment creation and income generation. Government has also started realizing the importance of tourism, and most of the states have created a separate ministry for tourism development. Conclusion: tourism has become the second largest industry in the world in terms of creating employment and generating income. For many countries, it has become the main source of foreign exchange earner. It is a flourishing industry today. After creating separate ministry for tourism development in the government, this industry is expanding very fast. Thank you.